The farm that fought back. Ethan Carter had always known the Pinecrest HOA was a nightmare. But this was personal. Standing in the middle of his modest but thriving farm, he clutched a crisp, white letter stamped with the official Pinecrest Homeowners Association seal. His hands shook as he read it again, his mind struggling to digest the absurdity of the words glaring up at him. As of immediate effect, all agricultural activities, including but not limited to farming, livestock raising, and gardening exceeding 10 square feet, are strictly prohibited. Noncompliance will result in daily fines of $500. Ethan crumpled the paper in his fist, letting out a sharp, bitter laugh, one born of disbelief and raw fury. His farm wasn't some sprawling industrial operation. It was his home, his passion, his lifeline. Here, on this half-acre plot he'd inherited from his grandfather, he grew crisp vegetables, raised free-range chickens, and tended to his scruffy little goat, Muffin, who was currently nibbling at the edge of the violation notice with oblivious glee. He glanced at the small camera propped on his porch railing, the one he'd set up months ago to document the HOA's relentless petty tyranny for his growing online audience. With a steadying breath, he hit record. The Pinecrest HOA thinks they can stomp out my farm, my business, my whole way of life, he said, his voice tight with resolve. Well, they've just messed with the wrong guy. The community meeting was already underway when Ethan burst through the double doors of the Pinecrest clubhouse. The air inside reeked of stale coffee and sanctimonious outrage. At the front of the room sat the HOA's ruling triumvirate, a trio Ethan had nicknamed the Suburban Overlords. There was Lisa Grayson, the self-appointed empress of neighborhood perfection, perched in the center with a smile so sharp it could cut glass. To her left sat Greg, the enforcer Malone, gripping his clipboard like it was a sacred relic. On her right was Cheryl Voss, the treasurer, who handled HOA funds with the glee of a pirate counting gold coins. Ethan, Lisa purred, her tone dripping with crocodile tears. I assume you received our little notice? Ethan flung the crumpled letter onto the table in front of her. You mean this garbage? Yeah, I got it. And I'm telling you now, it's not happening. Greg adjusted his oversized glasses, flipping through his clipboard with the zeal of a man who lived for red tape. Actually, per Section 12, subsection B of the HOA guidelines. Stop right there, Greg. Ethan interrupted, raising a hand. That rule didn't exist last month. Lisa tilted her head, her sleek auburn hair swishing like a villain's cape. Well, Ethan, things change. The neighborhood has expressed concerns. Ethan crossed his arms. What concerns? Lisa sighed theatrically, as if explaining gravity to a toddler. Property values, Ethan. The farm aesthetic is disruptive. And then there's the smell. The smell? Ethan echoed, incredulous. Cheryl pinched her nose delicately. The chickens, Ethan. They're chickens, he snapped. They cluck, they lay eggs, they exist. Lisa plastered on her best HOA-approved smile. Look, we're not saying you have to get rid of everything. Just scale it down. No animals, no visible crops, no farm. No farm. Ethan finished, his voice flat. Lisa nodded tightly. Exactly. The room buzzed with murmurs. Some of Ethan's supporters, neighbors who loved his fresh eggs and tomatoes, shifted uneasily in their seats. The HOA had been poisoning the well against him for weeks, whispering that his farm was dragging down their home values compared to the pristine subdivisions nearby. You can't just rewrite the rules whenever you feel like it, Ethan argued. Greg cleared his throat, flashing his shiny HOA badge like a sheriff's star. Actually, the board voted unanimously to amend the HOA charter. It's all legal. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Who voted? Lisa's smile widened. The board, of course. So, just the three of you? Cheryl beamed. Democracy. Ethan's jaw clenched so hard he felt his teeth ache. This is insane. Lisa leaned forward, her voice dropping to a faux sympathetic whisper. I know this is hard for you, Ethan, but it's just not the HOA way. He barked a short, bitter laugh. Oh, you mean it's not your way? Lisa stood, brushing imaginary lint from her blazer. I understand you're upset, but noncompliance means fines. An inspector will be by tomorrow morning. If you don't start clearing things out, those fees will pile up fast. Ethan glared at her. You're not taking my farm. Lisa's smile turned patronizing. Ethan, It's not your farm anymore. The words hit him like a punch to the gut. He felt the room shrink, the weight of dozens of eyes pressing in. The HOA had been chipping away at him for months, and now they'd finally drawn a line in the sand. But if they thought he'd roll over, they were sorely mistaken. Ethan turned on his heel and stormed out, fists balled at his sides. The war had begun. By the time he reached his property, a new violation notice was already taped to his gate. He ripped it off and scanned the fine print. $500 fine. Reason: unauthorized agricultural structures. Muffin trotted up beside him, bleating curiously. Ethan scratched her head and muttered, "Looks like we've got a fight on our hands, girl." Inside, he slammed the notice onto his kitchen table, frustration boiling over. Muffin sniffed at it, probably wondering if it was a snack. The HOA's audacity was staggering. They thought they could crush him with fines and bureaucracy. They had no idea who they were dealing with. Ethan grabbed his phone and fired up a live stream. "All right, folks," he said, his voice steady despite the fire in his chest. "The Pinecrest HOA just declared war on my farm. They think I'm going down without a fight. But let me tell you, this farm's been here longer than their overpriced McMansions, and I'm not letting a bunch of clipboard-wielding tyrants tell me what I can do on my own land." The chat lit up instantly. "They can't do that. Sue them. HOAs are legalized extortion. Unleash the goat on their lawns." Ethan smirked at that last one. Tempting, but no, he needed a real plan. The first battle was lost, but the war? The war was just heating up. The next morning, Ethan gathered his allies in his barn, now their makeshift war room. First was Sophie Nguyen, his best friend and a law student with a temper that could melt steel. She had zero patience for HOA nonsense and a knack for finding loopholes. Next came Walter Hayes, a grizzled old-timer who'd been clashing with Lisa since the HOA's inception in the early 2000s. His petty, vengeful streak was exactly what Ethan needed. Then there were Diego and Rosa Morales, owners of the local diner, who relied on Ethan's fresh eggs and produce to keep their menu top-notch. Sophie crossed her arms, glaring at the latest violation notice. "They can't do this. It's a blatant abuse of power." "Yeah, but it's legal abuse," Ethan muttered. "They wrote the rules to cover their asses." Walter grinned, his weathered face creasing. "Then we just have to play dirtier." Phase 1 of Operation Save the Farm was simple: rally the neighborhood. Ethan, Sophie, and Rosa went door to door with a petition to overturn the new farming ban. Some neighbors signed immediately, folks who'd been buying Ethan's honey or swapping veggies with him for years. Others, though, had been swayed by Lisa's propaganda. Mrs. Helen Carver, whose lawn looked like a golf course, pursed her lips when Ethan knocked. "I don't know, Ethan. The HOA says farms tank home values." Ethan raised an eyebrow. "Did they also mention they're using our HOA fees for board retreats at fancy resorts?" Helen's eyes widened. "Wait, what?" Sophie smirked, pulling out a printout. "Check this expense report we dug up. Thousands of dollars on HOA wellness retreats. Guess who's footing the bill?" Ethan handed her the petition. "Those snakes," Helen muttered, snatching a pen. "Where do I sign?" One by one, the petition grew. But just as they gained traction, the HOA struck back. The next morning, Ethan found a stack of new violations on his porch. $500 fine. Unauthorized gathering. Apparently petition meetings were now public disturbances. $250 fine. Improper fence height. His fence hadn't changed in years. $1,000 fine. Goat at large. Muffin had wandered into Lisa's yard and knocked over a gnome. Ethan picked up Muffin, who bleated innocently. "They framed you, huh?" Sophie snatched the papers. "This is harassment. We need to hit back." Walter chuckled, pulling a dusty box from his truck. "Lucky for you. I've been hoarding HOA dirt for years." Inside the box was gold. Files proving the HOA had broken its own rules repeatedly. Lisa's driveway was illegally extended. Greg's house had a non-compliant paint color. Cheryl's budget lacked transparency, hinting at misused funds. Ethan grinned. "Oh, this is going to be fun." That night, they launched Phase 2, public humiliation. Ethan uploaded a viral video exposing the HOA's hypocrisy, photos of Lisa's driveway, Greg's paint job, even Cheryl's suspicious wine subscription, all paid for with HOA dues. Within hours, the comments exploded. "They can break rules, but we can't." Expose them. Avenge Muffin. The video spread like wildfire, and the HOA's support began to crack. But just when Ethan thought he had the upper hand, the HOA pulled their dirtiest trick yet. The next morning, a letter arrived from their lawyer. Your farm is now classified as non-residential land use, violating the Pinecrest HOA charter. Failure to comply will result in a lawsuit. Ethan stared at the paper, stunned. They're taking me to court? Sophie scanned it, her face darkening. They're claiming it's not residential anymore because you sell produce. It's nonsense, but they're pushing hard. Walter cracked his knuckles. Time to lawyer up. The neighborhood buzzed with gossip that day, partly because of Ethan's video, partly because Lisa had tried to tow a firefighter's truck during an emergency call, sparking outrage. Inside her pristine home, Lisa paced, phone in hand, fuming as her calls to the board went unanswered. When someone finally picked up, she snapped. Mark, I need to file a complaint against Ethan. He's defying us, disrupting the peace, encouraging rebellion. A tired sigh came through. You mean the firefighter thing? Yes, she hissed. We need to set an example. Karen. Lisa. Mark corrected himself. Do you know how bad this looks? The neighborhood's furious. We had an emergency meeting tonight, without you. You're out as enforcer, effective immediately. Lisa's stomach dropped. You can't. We did. Unanimous vote. You've turned us into a joke. The line went dead. The next morning, Lisa woke to a new reality. Peace. No one scrambled to hide trash cans or yank weeds under her watchful eye. People laughed, chatted, lived. Then she saw it. A sign in front of her house. Neighborhood barbecue. Celebrating the end of HOA tyranny. Free food, all welcome. Ethan waved from his driveway, loading a cooler into his truck. Morning, Lisa. Hope to see you at the barbecue. Her blood pressure spiked. Enjoy your little party, she spat. I'm fighting this. Ethan shrugged. It's over, Lisa. No one wants you in charge anymore. As the barbecue kicked off, music blaring, kids running wild, Lisa watched from her window. For the first time, she saw what a neighborhood could be, not a sterile utopia, but a living community. She turned away, plotting her next move. This wasn't over, not yet. Ethan's viral video turned the war nuclear. His phone buzzed nonstop, reporters, lawyers, strangers nationwide messaging him. HOA tyranny was a plague, and Ethan was its reluctant poster boy. Sipping coffee one morning, he nearly choked when Sophie burst in, waving her laptop. You're not gonna believe this, she said. Channel 5 wants you on live TV. About your fight with the HOA. Actual TV? Ethan blinked. Not just YouTube. Real TV, Sophie grinned. The kind Lisa watches with her overpriced tea. Ethan knew then. This wasn't just about his farm anymore. It was a public reckoning. Meanwhile, at the HOA clubhouse, Lisa was unraveling. Articles piled up. Local farmer battles, HOA dictatorship, HOA's petty rules exposed. Hashtag Justice for Muffin trends nationwide. And her nails clicked furiously against the table. This is a disaster, she snapped. Greg, sweating, stammered. Should we drop the lawsuit? No. Lisa whipped around. That's what he wants. If we back down, we lose everything. Cheryl cleared her throat. Actually, Lisa, we've already lost control. The HOA Facebook page is a war zone. People want refunds, new leadership. Lisa's eye twitched. Over my dead body. She slammed her fist down. We double down. Court. Smear him. Destroy his credibility. Greg gulped. And if that fails? Lisa's eyes glinted. We make sure that farm never qualifies as residential again. 3 days later, the town courthouse was packed. Team Ethan, farmers, small business owners, fed-up neighbors, faced Team HOA, a shrinking cadre of Lisa loyalists. Ethan sat with Sophie and a new lawyer, funded by online donations. Across the aisle, Lisa vibrated with rage, flanked by Greg and Cheryl. The judge flipped through the case file. The HOA claims Mr. Carter's property isn't residential because he sells farm goods. Lisa nodded. Correct, Your Honor. It's a commercial business. Sophie shot up. Objection. The HOA's approved home businesses before, like Greg's illegal woodworking shop. Greg turned red. Hey. And Lisa's consulting gig, Sophie plowed on, which made less than $200 last year. Lisa's jaw tightened. That's irrelevant. The judge raised an eyebrow. It's very relevant. Unequal enforcement suggests bias. Sophie dropped a bombshell. We found the original 1970s HOA charter. Ethan's land was a farm before the HOA existed. It's grandfathered in. The judge scanned the document. Interesting. So his farm's protected. Lisa sputtered. But, Your Honor, I've heard enough. The judge cut in. This is a targeted attack. The farming ban's unenforceable. Case dismissed. Cheers erupted. Then came the kicker. Now about Mr. Carter's counterclaim, harassment, fraud, illegal fines. Proceed. Ethan nodded. Absolutely. 2 hours later, the verdict landed. The farming ban was toast. Ethan's farm was safe. Lisa, Greg, and Cheryl were fined $50,000 each, and the HOA had to refund all improper fines. Lisa stormed out, dodging a reporter's mic. Behind her, Greg tripped into a plant. It was poetic. That night, the neighborhood threw a farm festival. String lights twinkled, Muffin wore a ribbon, and the HOA trio volunteered as part of their settlement. Greg wrangled the petting zoo, Cheryl sold produce with a fake smile, and Lisa manned the chicken coop. Ethan handed her eggs. Try these, Lisa. Organic, not HOA approved. The crowd roared. Ethan savored the victory. The HOA had lost, and he'd never forget it. But the next morning, Sophie called, voice tense. Lisa filed an appeal. They're taking it to county court with a real legal team. Ethan swore. I should have known she wouldn't quit. She hired Feldman Trask, Sophie said. Corporate sharks. They bankrupt people. Ethan stood, adrenaline surging. Then we prepare for war. The county courthouse was a different beast. Suits, ties, lawyers who oozed menace. Lisa sat smugly with her high-priced attorneys. Ethan's team, Sophie, a property rights expert, a zoning specialist, and an HOA killer lawyer, matched her blow for blow. Feldman, Lisa's lead counsel, stood. The HOA was unlawfully overruled. We seek to reinstate the farming ban and impose $250,000 in retroactive fines. Ethan's jaw dropped. Sophie leapt up. This is retaliation. His farm's legally protected. The judge frowned. Retroactive fines? Explain. Feldman smirked. Mr. Carter's sales make his farm commercial, voiding residential zoning. Ethan's fists clenched. They were twisting the law to bury him. But Sophie was ready, slamming down a binder. Over 50 HOA-approved home businesses, including Lisa's consulting firm. How's that different? Lisa stammered. I don't run a farm. The judge cut in. Why is his farm commercial, but your business isn't? Lisa froze. Ethan stood. Your Honor, I sell eggs and veggies to neighbors, donate to the food bank. This isn't about zoning. It's personal. The judge nodded. 15 minutes later, the ruling came. Ethan's farm was permanently safe. The appeal was denied. The HOA faced an audit, and Lisa's trio was ousted. The courtroom cheered. Lisa looked faint. Ethan exhaled, victorious. Outside, Sophie grinned. You took down the county's toughest HOA. What's next? Ethan smirked. More goats. Muffin bleated. The crowd laughed. The war was won. The sun rose over Pinecrest, bathing Ethan's farm in golden light. Muffin chewed the last HOA notice as Ethan sipped coffee on his porch. For the first time in months, his land was truly his. No fines, no Lisa, no Greg lurking with his clipboard. The HOA was defeated, and now came the fun part, rebuilding and revenge. The special election changed everything. Walter became HOA president, slashing pointless rules and replacing them with Don't Be a Jerk. Diego and Rosa joined the board, cutting fees after uncovering Lisa's retreat spending. Lisa ran for re-election but was laughed out when someone played her courtroom meltdown. I am the HOA. She stormed off, humiliated. The neighborhood bloomed. Gardens sprouted, lawns got quirky. Mr. Carver's Flamingo Army became a local legend. Ethan's farm thrived, media coverage boosting sales. His Suburban Farming 101 channel took off, inspiring others to fight HOAs. The final blow was the Maplewood Farm Festival, a block party on Ethan's land. Food trucks, music, a dunk tank with Greg. The HOA trio volunteered per their settlement. Greg wrestled Muffin, Cheryl sold produce, Lisa scooped chicken poop. Ethan handed her eggs. Organic, not HOA approved. The crowd howled. As the festival rocked on, Sophie clinked her glass against Ethan's. What's next? More goats, he smirked. Muffin bleated. The cheers echoed. The HOA was dead, but Ethan's farm would live forever.